All right, welcome back to the slideshow. I'm Dakota Jackson. I'm a freelance trombonist here in New Orleans, and I'm interested in cultivating an interest and following on the trombone. I've got my co-host Ben with me today.
Hi guys, I'm Benjamin Wiltz. I'm a band director, bass trombone player, fly fishing guide, and grad school dropout.
All right, man. So, what's your week been like, man?
Dude, it has been crazy. So, as I mentioned, I am a fly fishing guide on the side. If anyone hasn't ever tried that, I highly suggest you do. Fly fishing is great fun and also wonderful, especially during these times of COVID. Um, well, earlier this spring, I actually ordered a raft for the business. I had been waiting on this raft since April, and I finally was able to pick it up all the way up in Troy, Ohio this past week. So I drove up to Troy, Ohio, and drove back down to Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. I was on the road for about 20 hours total. So that was a pretty exciting deal to get my raft in, and had a couple successful trips so far with it. And so that was really the biggest thing that happened. Not so much in the way of music this week. Haven't had any gatherings or played with anybody except for just kind of at the house by myself. But really have, like I said, other than that, though, week's been great, though. Just glad to, like I said, have such a major part of the business. But glad to have that ready to go.
Yeah, man. Did you stop or did you go straight through on your 20 hours of driving?
I stopped at rest areas very often to get. I'd try to take naps. It never worked. I'd stop for 30 minutes. Would get too paranoid to sleep and then just keep driving. So no, I drove all the way through. It was absolutely miserable, but it was worth it when I got home and slept in my own bed. So
I'm pretty sure there's like trucker regulations that so you can't do that. Like just go straight through like that.
Well, thankfully, I was, instead of driving an 18-wheeler, I was driving a Tacoma with a 13-foot boat hanging out the back. So possibly a little bit scarier.
Yeah, you showed me the pictures of the boat. You had like a tailgate extender thing was like way out the back.
Yeah, it was pretty nerve wracking. I've got to be honest. That was a scary night. It was probably about 9 hours driving up and then 13 driving back, to give you an idea of how much speed I dropped, along with how nervous I was and kept pulling over and checking things. So it wasn't 12 and 12. It was, the drive back was nerve wracking. But no, man, how's your week been though?
It's been good. I I've talked about this a little bit, but I've been repairing this 3B, and I got my tuning slide in finally, but it's just the crook, so I'm gonna have to continue the technical side of things and try and solder it in myself and everything. I guess I could take it to somebody, but I'm gonna try and do it myself. It's a little annoying because I went out of my way to try and get the full tuning slide. But it'll be okay. The old one has a hole in it, so as long as it works better than that, which I'm sure it will. That's been up. I've been practicing pretty hard again. I just recently redeveloped another Hug the Cactus warm up, which is I've never studied with him or anything. I've just kind of seen his videos. But Jeremy Wilson, who teaches at the University of Tennessee, who's like a phenomenal trombone player, has this hug the cactus philosophy, and so just basically a warm up that makes sure and challenges me on all fronts, so that I'm getting a lot of progress in. So I've been doing that, and I also have been interviewing for a new job, giving lessons at a studio. So hopefully that comes through. So I say, things are looking up on that front.
Yeah, man. I specifically remember you saying your doubts about ordering this slide from the conglomerate that is King Bach Khan. And I remember you being kind of worried about it just being the crook. And so you called them, which apparently that was an experience, just trying to get a hold of them, and still somehow managed to just get the crook by the end of it. So,
yeah, I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but Khan does not like you just taking their parts or whatever. So I had to do some deep diving to even get the parts, and I'm pretty sure they think I'm like a repair tech and not just some guy. But whatever, you know.
let's hope nobody over there plays trombone too much. Listen to this.
I mean, I've got the part now, so damage done, you know. So what do you got for us this week in current events, Ben?
So this week in current events, I actually have an article over in Florida. Now this is referring to events that happened earlier in the school year, but I just thought it was neat to find out what some people were doing during the beginnings of the COVID outbreak. Over in Parkland, Florida, the Boca Raton School of Rock, which is which is kind of like a lesson studio, similar to what you were mentioning you were actually interviewing for. They began offering private lessons to any band kids who went to a certain set of Florida schools. And one of those Florida schools actually was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which was involved in the Parkland, Florida shooting that happened 2 years ago. I believe it was 3 years ago, actually. But because of that shooting, as terrible as it was, there was already a foundation set up, and some of the money from that foundation went to help pay for these kids to continue to get lessons. So it's kind of encouraging that the lessons teachers are getting paid, but also the kids are getting lessons free of charge through this. And I couldn't see anything that said whether or not this went on through the summer, but I just think it's great that throughout all this that there are kids who are still able to further their music education. That's really encouraging as a band director, because sometimes it's kind of hard to find quality music education, especially online. If you haven't taken a video lesson before, it is difficult, but it does show that students are willing to really work and do whatever they have to do to get time on their instrument. And so maybe not trombone specific, so the article highlighted a trombone player. I just thought it's neat that kids are going out of their way to pursue this, and that the adults are forking up the money and doing what they can do to give this to the kids.
Yeah, it's definitely like a weird time to be trying to get lessons and stuff, but I'm glad that the kids are still able to progress and that someone was able to help them out with that. I think Ian Bousfield not that long ago did a episode on online learning, and he had a lot of interesting thoughts. And I think that whenever this is over, it'll be nice to be able to look back and examine, you know, what out of this that we got that like can improve everything we do, you know, and that what we took for granted as well. So
exactly, man. I've actually had some experience with Skype lessons when I went to school, and I think they could have gone better. And I think at the end of this, we will have some more refined techniques for online learning.
all right, so the topic this week is the Patron Saints of the Trombone, which is a title we kind of came up with. And the idea is basically people who have done a lot to cultivate an interest and promote a following on trombone. And we tried to get away from just players. Obviously, there's a lot of players that have, you know, played at such a high level that they brought in a lot of interest or changed everything. And kind of focusing more on people who've just done a lot of work to promote the trombone outside of just their playing. So, you know, we threw around some names, and I still feel like these people are definitely that, but we're not highlighting them. But like, you know, Joe Alessi, while he's done a lot with ITF specifically being president, he like is obviously a lot more famous for his orchestral playing and for his solo playing. And that's kind of the same thing with guys like Christian Lindbergh, who once again kind of changed the whole landscape of solo trombone, or somebody like Irby Green, on the jazz side of things and tried to focus on some other people. And the big person that I think inspired this whole topic that we're going to start off with is Michael Davis. So it's like even kind of hard to get going on Michael because there's so much stuff out there. I'll just kind of start with how I like learned about him. I think it's funny that I probably had seen his videos and his music that he wrote before. I definitely saw, I think one of my earliest intros was the 15-minute warm-up. So I definitely saw his literature and his interview stuff way before I even heard him play. And I think that just speaks to like the amount of material that he's put out and the amount of work he's put out. But like, how did you learn about Michael Davis, Ben?
So yeah, you mentioned the 15-minute warm up, but it's funny. We both had the same lessons teacher, Mark Wyndham, and even though Mark Wyndham did have me go over the 15-minute warm up, which I'm pretty sure he had all students look at some point. For some reason, the first thing that sticks out to my mind with Michael Davis was the Trombone Institute of Technology, which is a tenor trombone, bass trombone duet. I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. There's a video of Michael Davis and Bill Reichenbach playing that together, and that stuck with me big time. And so when I thought Michael Davis, the first thing that came to mind was that video. Pretty sure it's actually posted on YouTube of them two recording that. But,
yeah, it definitely is, man. Him and Bill playing that. Which for those who play the trombone, there's a more fun name for the Trombone Institute of Technology that gets thrown around, but I'll leave that to your own devices to find. So kind of a segue off of that, I just wanted to talk about his musical contributions because he's done a lot of stuff. He's originally, he was in a musical family. He grew up in San Francisco, but he got his big break with Buddy Rich. And I happen to know that he ended up replacing Conrad Herwig in that band. The only reason I know that is because of an interview he did with Conrad, where he said that replacing Conrad was was quite a task because like when Conrad was in the band, Buddy took a lot of solos that were in the tenor sax and moved them to the trombone. And Michael Davis said when he got in the band, he was like, "Why, why is all this craziness going on in the trombone?" So it was like big shoes to fill. But he since then kind of moved out to New York, and he's been on tour with a lot of people. He's on tour with so he's been on tour with everything from the Rolling Stones to Frank Sinatra, and since then he's made a lot of albums, which I did write down here. Sidewalk Cafe, Heroes, Midnight Crossing, Absolute Trombone, Bone Town, Brass Nation, New Brass, Trumpet 11, Absolute Trombone 2, Triton Brass, Bone Alone, Hip Bone, Big Band, and 5. I'm familiar with some of those. Absolute Trombone, Hip Bone, Big Band, I bought, and 5, his newest album I've listened to as well, which is just a brass quintet. He does a lot of writing for stuff. This trumpet album, I think, is just trumpet. I haven't actually checked it out, Trumpet 11, but his son plays trumpet. Both of his kids plays. His son plays trumpet, and he's going to college somewhere in Florida, I think. Maybe in Frost. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. And then his other son plays bass. But, yeah, he does a lot of arranging for brass and stuff. And there's a lot of albums. I know one of those is with Reichenbach. The Hip Bone Big Band, which spoiler alert, it's going to be the album recommendation this week, has a ton of people on it, so I'm going to wait to get into that, although it's a super killing album. But even though that's a lot of albums, his contributions outside of that have been so much bigger. One of the first things I want to talk about is this Hip Bone U, which is something he's created, where he gets not just trombone players he's ventured out, but a ton of trombone players, everything from Joe Alessi, Ira Nepes, Conrad Herwig, Michael Dees, John Fedchuk, all these guys. Going outside of that, some trumpet player, Ralph Alessi, Joe Alessi's brother who plays trumpet, just a number of people bass trombone people too. Blair Bollinger. I don't want to leave anybody out. It's
You
literally
got Dave Taylor, man, and the
yeah.
Dave Taylor interview was like probably some of the most I've seen Dave talk on YouTube, and it honestly was like one of my favorite interviews I've seen with Michael Davis. So there you go. Check that out for sure.
I would list everybody, but it is like an insane amount of people. So he does these interviews with them, and like Ben said, I think that they usually go really well because Michael is like a really great player himself, and they feel comfortable around him. So it's like really conversational, and people let loose. And I'll talk about some of those in a second. But another thing that he has, and you do have to pay for these. I think he has videos that like kind of advertise what they are, so you don't go in blind. But he has like this Hitbone U thing where he has, and I've bought one of them, where he has, kind of varying lengths, but like an hour or so videos of people teaching different concepts. And they're usually pretty specific, which is actually kind of good. And from people who are like at the top of it. I mean, I know Michael D's was about improvising in different ranges. Conrad Herwig's, which is the one I bought, unsurprisingly, is about superimposing minor pentatonics to get a modern sound. Which is just a great video, not to get hung up on it, but, Conrad has like this incredible, he has this incredible modern sound where he's still in because of like the superimposition idea that he talks about that he learned from guys like Freddie Hubbard and Joe Henderson. And then there's, I know Blair Bollinger's is about valve technique, and I think John Fetchock's is about slide technique. Don't quote me on that. But just, amazing musicians with these great videos. And it's just, Michael just sets up the camera pretty much and introduces them, and then they go. So I'd say they're worth the money. I think it's something you can rent. It's used as a service with Vimeo, which is not a super popular video service, but I think he does it so you can have a little more control. But you can rent them for a certain amount, or you can just buy them for like a little more. I'd have to go back and check to see how much they were, but I thought it was worth the money for sure. And I've definitely, with that Conrad video, for example, gone back and looked at it over and over again to try and see if I can find something else or revisit a topic. But on the Bone to Pick, that's the name of the interview side of it, there's some incredible interviews, and those are completely free. I think he has them on podcast form. Do you know about that, Ben?
I don't. And if you're listening to this, I imagine you're a podcast listener, and it might be worth checking out. However, the YouTube, like they're all on YouTube, and I think it's worth just sitting down and watching it. I cannot say how many faces I've been able to put to these players that I've listened to. Usually Michael Davis would have something to do with it, and you can actually see like what these players are like as kind of a human. I can't stress that enough, that those Bone to Pick interviews, man, you see just a different side of these guys.
Yeah, man, I'll just talk about a couple of them that have meant a lot to me, and this is, I can say this because once again, there's so many of them that I can't talk about all of them. I mean, he interviewed Joe Alessi, and but like, obviously the Conrad one was big for me because I've been a huge Conrad fan, just to get this deep insight into Conrad. But Charlie Vernon was a good one. If you're not familiar with Charlie Vernon, he's a great bass trombonist. He plays in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. But he's definitely a character, and I think that came out in the interview, and it was some good stuff on that one. He did one with John Fetchock, which I found super inspiring because Fetchock talked a lot about struggles early on with getting into Eastman School of Music and stuff like that, which is kind of crazy. You don't think about some of these guys who are like at the top of their field now, struggling early on, but it was just definitely something they had to work on a lot. And now he's there, so I found that super inspiring. But yeah, I mean, Ben said a great one with Dave Taylor. I mean, there's just so many great interviews on there. He has wrote books, as most everybody who we're going to talk about today probably has a lot of literature and stuff out there. He has a ton of compositions that I didn't even list them all off. But there's a ton in there. I just mainly want to focus on his A2 books and his warm-up books and stuff like that. But yeah, like Trombone Institute of Technology, like Ben was saying, is a great duet one. He's a lot of great trombone specific stuff, like a lot of trombone ensemble or brass ensemble, or he does a lot of stuff where he like makes music and then you can add the trombone in, which is always nice. All right, so his literature is 15-minute warm-ups, which we talked about. He's got those for other instruments as well. I think he's wrote them out for trumpet too. And those, he's also got a 20-minute warm-up. He has a bone kill suite, which is like 15 etudes that he wrote. 5 suites, 15 etudes is what it says. I don't know if those 5 suites include those 15 etudes or not. He's got total trombones, another etude book, 13 etudes in that one. Is a building your range book, a brass buzz, which I think is just kind of a all-encompassing fundamentals book, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Just add trombone, 20 original songs. That's what I was talking about, where he has like something pre-recorded and then you play along with it. Which I will say he does a lot of, if almost all of his books, I know 15-minute warm-ups for sure, have like a CD with them that you can play along with. So you're not just alone if that's something you're looking for. Double dip for trombone. Yeah, and then he just has a ton of arrangements after that. I will say a lot of these, build your range, brass buzz, a couple of these, if there's bass trombone stuff to be worked on, he has those as well as a bass trombone option. He also, just thought I'd mention this since we're kind of deep in the weeds, has a Michael Davis model trombone, is a Shire's Michael Davis model, and I think they have a Michael Davis Plus and a Michael Davis, and also something similar to like a 2B, 3B kind of option, where one's larger than the other in that sense. But that's what I've got on Michael Davis. What do you have on our next guy, Ben?
Yeah, so our next person we're going to talk about is Arthur Pryor. Now, there's a lot out on him, and I'm going to try my best to stick to as much as possible the trombone side. To the rest of the world, Arthur Pryor is actually known more as a band leader. This was news to me as a trombone player. Always thought his trombone playing was first, but apparently he spent almost as much time writing for band and conducting as he did playing trombone. Arthur Pryor he played trombone for the Sousa Band back in the late 1890s, or in the 1890s. He was an American trombonist. And while I know we've talked about how we weren't going to pick these people based on his trombone, based on their ability alone, I do find it pretty impressive, though, that Arthur Pryor managed to write a lot of the trombone solos that he did play. And they say with the Sousa Band, he probably played somewhere around 10,000 solos. Now, this was Arthur Pryor's estimate, so that could also be a little exaggerated. A lot of people consider him to be the most important or the most notable non-jazz trombonist of the early 20th century. But besides just his playing, what Arthur Pryor did was he really brought the trombone to the forefront for just a second as a solo instrument. We all know that modern times Christian Lindbergh definitely did that as well. But Arthur Pryor would write these solos that were variations on a theme. Some popular ones were like Thoughts of Love and Bluebells of Scotland. Thoughts of Love was actually more popular than Bluebells of Scotland for a while. However, whenever people like Joe Alessi started recording Bluebells, along with many others, I'd say that's probably past that Thoughts of Love big time. But he's wrote quite a bit of music for the trombone, especially, like I said, variations on a theme style music that a lot of composers nowadays are still emulating. There's Stephen Frank as a bass trombone player. at my senior recital, I played the Stephen Frank's Barnacle Bill the Sailor. That was a salute to Arthur Pryor, if there ever was one, just adapted for bass trombone, which I thought was neat. Some cool things about Arthur Pryor, I thought when I was reading about this. So he was taken all over the world with the Sousa band. And whenever they were in Germany, the German army actually made all of their trombone players, they brought them all in at one point so they could watch him play. At the end of his concert, they actually said that they demanded that he take apart his trombone to prove that it was not some sort of, quote, Yankee trick. So when we talk about a patron saint of trombone, I really do think that Arthur Pryor, even though it's mostly with playing, I really do feel like he definitely fits this because he was very prolific at the time. And I don't think we've had somebody like him who's traveled the world that much and performed for these people. I mean, he performed for the Tsar of Russia. He performed for kings of England. I mean, he really got around very quickly. His solo career wasn't very long. I think he played up until 1903 before he started leading his own band. So most of his trombone playing happened in a very short amount of time where he made a huge impact. So I do think that's pretty neat. Now, there will be experts on Arthur Pryor. There have been papers written on Arthur Pryor that they might be able to bring more information. And somebody might say, oh, well, when he led his band, he played some. And I'm sure he played some of his own music when he led his band. But it really seemed like after 1903, he started to focus on conducting and composing more so than trombone playing. Apparently also, I guess he got so popular and he got to the point where he decided he was going to pursue politics for a small bit too. So I thought that was neat. But no, I think all trombonists, especially by the time they reach high school, have heard of Arthur Pryor. And I imagine back in the 1900s, just any band person in general, and I say band person as anybody who listened to band music would probably would have been well associated with Arthur Pryor. I mean, he was in the Sousa band. He was definitely high ranking. He was one of his top soloists, and he was the associate conductor. So I just feel like as an ambassador for the trombone, I think he might have been our first really, really strong ambassador. And makes me proud that he's an American too. So.
Yeah, I actually honestly didn't even know he was a band leader. So there's that. I mean, I really thought he was just a soloist. And I'll also say that, while he's famous because of his solo playing or whatever, we can say that, maybe we should have included Christian Lambert because there's something, I feel like in modern times, the thing that's highlighted about Arthur Pryor is the fact that he was an ambassador for the trombone and the fact that people play, I mean, for me, like Bluebells of Scotland is like, I don't know, maybe the most popular solo trombone piece. I know that's kind of controversial. I'm not trying to dig in there,
No.
but yeah, I feel like for me growing up, especially, I was like, that was like the piece.
Absolutely. I think it's almost a given. I went to a Canadian brass concert, and they were sitting there talking about how the trombone doesn't get very many solos, and they kept talking about this, and they're saying all this stuff, and they're doing this long introduction for solo, and there was no program, so I had no clue what song was coming up next. But about halfway through the description, them talking about the trombone being neglected, I was like, I bet this is going to be Bluebells of Scotland. And predictably, it was Bluebells of Scotland. It's a very ubiquitous piece. I mean, this is non-trombone players. If they're going to know a trombone piece, it'll probably be Bluebells.
Yeah, I think that the bigger point is that, like, yeah, his legacy is now kind of a lot bigger than his playing career was. So, and I also like a little fun Bluebell story to kind of do a little deep diving. You know, Joe Alessi has the Bluebells recording, and it's phenomenal. A lot of people think it's the best, and maybe it is. But I will say that one of the top three most amazing things I've ever seen on the trombone, definitely live, was when I saw Ian Bousfield play Bluebells of Scotland. Like if you've not YouTubed it, it's mind blowing. It's insane, man. He's just
Yeah, we got to see that with the Army Field Band Trombone Ensemble. Ian was kind of a surprise guest, and we were in a room. It was no bigger than the living room of my house, I swear. And they packed a bunch of people in there, and I was so glad we managed to catch that concert and over at International Trombone Festival. But I will say, man, I didn't think I could be surprised by Bluebells of Scotland, especially by someone of the level as Ian Bousfield is. But wow, that was serious.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I got to say, like, that was my favorite thing we saw at ITF, and there was a lot of great stuff. It's just like first of all, we were in a really tiny room, so we were right up on him. That was amazing. We didn't expect Ian, but one of the guys in that quartet, by the way, that quartet is fantastic. They sound amazing. But one of the guys in that quartet studied with Ian, so they had him come in and play that with him in the background. And you have to go listen to the piece to get the full effect, but there's a part where he's playing just blazing fast, and then he takes like a comical break, and I remember like he was like playing just so insanely fast, and then he took a breath, and then some guy sitting near us just started laughing like that. Had no other response other than just to laugh, man. It was truly crazy.
Well, I think there was a collective breath when he stopped too.
Yeah, that man, that was definitely one of the more amazing moments of that whole event. So kind of going on, wanted to talk about kind of a category of people that I feel like have done a ton to promote the trombone, and that's kind of the invention of like the YouTube trombonist. And there's two guys we're going to talk about here. I'll take the first one, but it's Paul the trombonist. If you're not familiar, I think his full name is Paul Noel, and he lives in the LA area. He went to Berkeley, and he was in the Glenn Miller Orchestra for a bit, and I think he moved out to LA to get a little bit of work playing-wise, as well as being in the studio. But then he started creating videos, and he's like, I don't really know him personally, so I don't know how much of it is to like make the YouTube videos interesting versus his actual personality, but there's like some kind of, eccentric stuff going on. He's got like this banana with him, and he makes these corny jokes. But he does a lot of covers of just like pop songs and stuff. But I think he's like a really legit trombonist. I will say that I think that Paul's a great trombonist. He's a big JJ fan, and he does like a really good job playing that jazz stuff. He does have a CD out. So his album out is Journey to the World. But I actually we're doing two guys, and one of the big reasons I wanted to take Paul was because personally he's kind of had a big impact on me. Whenever I first went to UAM was right around the time I discovered him. And I remember he was kind of goofy, and my first semester in undergrad was a little weird because I didn't really know a ton of people. It was right before I met Ben. Started hanging out with him all the time. But I just basically practiced all the time. I think Ben can vouch for this. All I did was practice, eat, and sleep, and but it kind of got into like a dark headspace because you're not really interacting with people, and I was shedding super hard. I'm glad I did that for sure, but also that's not something you want to do all the time. And I remember because it's kind of serious when you're trying to get really good and you're trying to improve. And I remember Paul just kind of being this source of like, you can have so much optimism on the trombone. I mean, he has some really goofy videos. I mean, he's done Nirvana covers that I think are pretty cool. And he knows some people in LA, so he'll have singers he knows do covers with them. But he has like a video called like I Like Cereal, and it's just completely goofy. I mean, he's a goofy guy, but he's a super creative guy. But he's really scaled up, man. He has like 40,000 plus followers on YouTube, and he's kind of gotten to the point now that he's really sufficient for himself. He doesn't need to rely on gigs necessarily. He can just use the YouTube thing, and he has a lot of different streams of income. And so now he's got, like I know right now he's been doing some different master classes. He just did like a master class with Scott Whitfield, who's a friend of his in LA, and you could sign up for that. He also has, he's been doing master classes recently on like business master classes on how he turned his musicality into a business that was sufficient. So he's kind of scaled up and done that. One of the big things he's done in terms of cultivating interest on the trombone is he did a series of videos called Bone Masters. There's 58 videos. Some people repeats, but he just interviews guys in LA. He knows a lot of guys out there, so he got some guys fast. Phil Wilson taught him at Berkeley, so him and Phil had a little series together. He also, some of the people he knew that weren't necessarily in the Bone Masters episode, but he did a little video series with the Turo Sandoval.
Yeah, man, that just a side note. I think the Bone Master series was your introduction of Paul the trombonist to me. I'm pretty sure that really, and for a while I did only watch the Bone Master series, but Paul produced a lot of great stuff himself, and I think I was missing out when I was just skipping to all the Bone Masters things. But I will say, man, yeah, I think that was my introduction to Paul the trombonist.
Yeah, those Bone Masters are great too, though, man. I've watched all of them for sure. I know he did a bunch of them. He took a break and he came back. And if you watch him from the very beginning, you can kind of see him get a better and better setup. But it's just him bringing people on. He talks about their gear. It was very trombone oriented. He talks about their gear, then he talks about, you know, kind of whatever they want to talk about, and they usually do some different topics. And there's a couple ones that like I've shown to other people like a lot, like the Bob McChesney one. He does. I definitely suggest you go check it out because he does this thing where he calls it a parlor trick. But if you're not familiar, Bob McChesney's this trombone player in LA who has like legendary fundamentals. He invented his own method of doodle tonguing. I own his doodle tonguing book and his normal fundamentals book. But he's talking about doodle tonguing scales, and he's going super fast, and he keeps going faster and faster and faster. And then he's like, you know, if you go fast enough, you can just kind of do this. And then he plays the scale in the in one position. And because he's been playing it so fast, you hear the whole scale, like your ear naturally fills in the gap. So I show that to people all the time, and they like think it's fake and go back. And it's funny, actually, I tested this out recently. If you go back and play the video super slow, you can actually hear that he is just repeating notes. Like he actually is just going like bop, 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 bop. But if you hear it after he's been playing the scale super fast, you just hear the scale. Your brain just fills in the gaps, which is crazy. That video is nuts. But, you know, he got some good videos in with Bill Watrous right before he passed away. So those are kind of a treasure now. He does have a number of books out there. I'll say with the books, one good thing about Paul, I'm not super familiar with any of them, but he has a lot of stuff about different techniques and stuff on YouTube anyways. And so with his books, you can kind of get an idea of his process and everything before you buy them, if you want that, to make sure that you're interested in getting that product. But who else you got in the YouTube forum, Ben?
So in the YouTube world, popular trombonists that you really can't you can't talk about YouTube trombonists without looking at Christopher Bill. So Christopher Bill does a lot of covers of popular music on trombone, and probably part of the reason I never got very much into Christopher Bill is because a lot of the music that he covered, I normally just wasn't a huge fan of in the first place. However, I mean, he definitely would fall into this category of, you know, a huge online ambassador for the trombone. And he definitely knows his stuff as well. I think he went to school over at the SUNY Purchase Conservatory. over in New York, which we have a buddy who's actually attending there now. And like he studied with like Stinson Paul Pollard, bass trombone player for the Met, and then John Fedshot too. So I thought that was pretty neat. There's some other people he studied with. Those are some notable ones. But like right now, he's like a marketing consultant with like the International Trombone Association. So I mean, people are taking this guy's YouTube success, and I think he's found a good way to market himself. And he's helping the entire trombone community kind of put themselves out there a little bit. Like just looking at his website, you know, he offers lessons. I haven't looked into those that much. I mean, it's very basic things. So I imagine he's geared more towards high school players in general, or just high school, middle school players. But no, he really does put out, like I said, a lot of videos. You know, his breakout video, and the only video I could name before we did some research for this was his cover of, was it Pharrell's? Yeah, is it
Pharrell Williams, Happy. I think.
Pharrell Williams, Happy. Yeah. Go ahead and send corrections about that, guys. But anyways, yeah, Happy. His cover of the song Happy. That one is a popular one. But he's got a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, he has a trombone, an all trombone version of Youngblood Brass Band's Brooklyn. He's got a lot of stuff from like Toy Story. He's got Dancing Queen, I guess if you're an ABBA fan. He's got a lot of stuff out there. And the big one for ITF that really helped push his popularity in the trombone community itself was the Bohemian Rhapsody that they did over at ITF. Now, he was not the only player, but he did organize that, which if you haven't seen Christopher Bill's Bohemian Rhapsody, I guess is what it's called. You should check that out as well. But no, this guy, you can tell that he is very passionate about the trombone community as a whole. So if you're going to want to check him out at his website, I don't know how he got this, man. He must have been early on this. But his website is classicaltrombone.com, which I think is kind of funny. And I almost, because there's no classical trombone to be found. It's all covers, but they're neat. They're actually good covers. I mean, he does well, and he doesn't claim anything else. Like I think he's a good ambassador for the trombone. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. And like I said, he wouldn't have been able to study with the people he studied with, or gone to the school he could have that he did go to, if he wasn't the real deal, at least to some extent. And so I think some people kind of think of that as like a sellout, but I think he's just playing music that he kind of liked and other people would like, and he's marketing it well. I mean, and I think that's an important aspect of the trombone community that they apparently needed, because, I mean, he got his position that way. So.
Yeah, I'll say that, like, when I first saw him, it was like with the Happy videos and stuff, and since then, like, it seems like now he's like evolved a lot, because I mean, I see him doing a lot of work with Carol Jarvis, or he recently just did a video with Peter Steiner, who's this really incredible up-and-coming trombonist. But he's really gotten his foot in the door with the trombone community, and I think he's using that to get resources out as far as interviews and playing with people. And then he has some videos where he like talks about technical stuff on the trombone. He also has some, I know for sure he has like a high range video. I haven't dug too deep on that, but
he's got a lot of range videos. I noticed actually. He's got, I think, 3 at least. Yeah, there was a time where you couldn't watch a YouTube video dealing with trombone whatsoever and not have Christopher Bill come up on your suggested playlist. This guy was a ruler of the YouTube suggestions for a long time. I don't know if Cody, I don't know if you had the same experience, man. But,
yeah, I definitely did, man. His cover videos have gotten a ton of views. He's definitely, and I'll also say that he like arranges those himself and stuff. I mean, so he has a lot of musical ability for sure. But yeah, man, I think we're gonna take a short break here, and then we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the slideshow. All right, so talking about patron saints of the trombone, people who've done a lot for the trombone. I had to mention this person, Tommy Peterson, and I'd imagine I'm going to get Ben's opinion on this, but you're probably familiar with him because of some kind of music that you played. Just an insane amount of literature.
Yeah, man. As a bass trombonist, dude, we get ignored a lot, but Tommy gave us lots of love. So.
Yeah, I found like staggering numbers of compositions by this guy. I literally can't sit here and list them all off, or this would be the worst podcast ever. I mean, it's like 300 compositions for trombone. Like he did 250 just for this thing called Hoyt's Garage, which I'll get to in a second. But I will say that I did find a bunch of stuff on this guy from the DMA paper that was available online from the University of North Carolina, from Michael Poland. I don't really know anything about this guy. I think his name is Michael Poland. It might be Delvin Michael Poland. Kind of hard to tell with some of the stuff here, but yeah, there's a lot of when doing research, there's a ton of like post-grad work available online. I'm pretty sure that my master's papers I just turned in are going to be online pretty soon. Me and Ben were talking about that. But I just want to give a huge shout out to this guy if he's listening. I don't know what he's doing now. I was trying to look him up to see if I could find out if you know him, if he's your trombone teacher, because this dissertation was from 2007, so that was 13 years ago. He could definitely be, he's got a DMA, he could definitely be a professor at a university. So if you know this Michael Poland, please let me know. But his paper was super good. So I got to read this paragraph because it completely summarizes why I decided to pick Tommy. Tommy Peterson, 1920 to 1998, was a 20th century trombonist and composer whose legacy continues through his many compositions and recordings. Although Peterson's life affected many in the trombone community, articles and other materials that describe his contributions are difficult to locate. A studio musician who often has been described as the foremost authority on playing the trombone, Peterson has been heard on countless soundtracks and recordings. And then he says down here at the end, remembered as a trombonist and composer, Peterson's albums and compositions document his substantial and varied contribution to trombone performance and literature. Highlighted by many performances with well-known singers and instrumentalists, Peterson's legacy is an unmatched quantity of literature for the trombone. And yeah, it's just that. Tommy moved out to LA, so he was a big guy in the LA scene. And I found out that he's on a ton of movies and stuff, some of which including I Love Lucy, The Danny Kaye Show, 77 Sunset Strip, Jack Smith Show. He did some television shows with Sinatra. I know he was in Sinatra's band a little bit. The Man and His Music, also the Flip Wilson Show. He was in The Music Man, Cleopatra. Oh, apparently he played, this is kind of cool, he played the Tommy Dorsey trombone solos in the Gene Krupa story. So when you need somebody to imitate the amazing Tommy Dorsey, I guess he was the call. In 1970s, Peterson returned to big bands playing and performing with Orrin Tucker, Tex Minnick, Freddie Martin, Billy Vaughn. And yeah, so I found out that a super cool little factoid here is that while he was doing a ton of movies and stuff, I guess people were kind of signing up with different like NBC studios or whatever. And he never signed up with a studio because he wanted to be able to do his own projects and freelance and do whatever he wanted. So he didn't want to be under contractual obligation, which I thought was cool. But he has a number of like books and stuff out there for the trombone. I know like right now I'm working on his one of his books, one of his, unaccompanied solos for tenor trombone. but he has just a ridiculous amount of duets and solo pieces for bass and tenor trombone, some of which include 10 duets for bass trombone, 10 duets for tenor and bass trombone, 10 pieces for tenor and bass trombone, 10 vendor for two bass trombones, etudes for bass trombone, unaccompanied solos for tenor trombone, unaccompanied solos for bass trombone, book one trombone duets, book two trios, book three quartets for trombones, book four quintets scores, book five scores sextets, book six trombone septets, five tenors, two basses, book seven concertos for trombones with trombone accompaniment and trumpet, Hollywood trombones, trombone music, Tommy Peterson book two. And this is just some of them. I could literally do this all day. He just wrote an intense. I know that I was on the trombone chat not that long ago, and they were talking about somebody who happened to study with him, knowing about some bass trombone duet book that no one can find now. It's just intense.
Yeah, man. I'm the bass trombone library from Tommy Peterson is ridiculous. For a long time before I knew he was just a regular tenor trombone player, which, you know, maybe that says about my ignorance, I thought he had to play bass trombone. I thought no one in their right mind would just be a straight up tenor trombone player and put all this lovely music out for the bass trombone. I was so thankful. If you play a trombone choir piece by Tommy Peterson, that bass trombone part's nice every time. You see Tommy Peterson up in the corner of your music, man, you're in for a treat for sure, especially as a bass trombone player. You mentioned those duets. Like I said, I don't know if the whole collection is available. I can tell you for a fact that I've played at least a few of those pieces, especially at my time when I was over at Northwestern State. My teacher was a literature collector for sure, and I could say he probably had that book. I don't think I've ever seen a more complete library of bass trombone music in general, but we did spend time during lessons actually sight reading some of those Tommy Peterson duets, if I remember correctly. I think there was 10 of them. But Tommy really looked out for our side of the spectrum.
Yeah, which is crazy, because another thing I want to point out is I've been playing some of his stuff, and it's really hard. By the way, like if you want to get into some advanced etudes and stuff, like Tommy's the guy. He definitely wrote stuff that was difficult. Is some jazz etude stuff that's super hard, and I was wondering, like on some of the stuff, like man, I wonder if Tommy used a trigger even, because he's kind of famous for playing just a straight tenor. I imagine he did play with the trigger. He probably even played some bass trombone. Being a studio guy out in LA at the time, he was probably trying to be as diverse as possible. At least that's definitely the vibe that's happening now. But he, but yeah, he was just mainly like a straight tenor guy. So the fact that he wrote so much bass trombone stuff just really speaks to him writing for the trombone. Another place where you see a ton of his music pop up is trombone ensembles and like trombone choirs. And I found out that he wrote over 250 pieces for this thing called Hoyt's Garage, which I learned about recently. Hoyt's Garage was a trombone ensemble that met in LA and kept playing. So I just want to point out, first of all, 250 pieces of trombone choir music is intense. I don't know how much of that is out there, but that's crazy, man. It's like the main guy. Hoyt's Garage, I just discovered, as I said, I feel like me and Ben are gonna have to do an episode on this because I am wildly interested now. But apparently it was this guy, I think his name was George Hoyt, and it was literally his garage. I've seen some pictures. It looks a little nicer than a garage, so I don't know if it's a side room or whatever. But even after Hoyt passed away, his wife kept letting people rehearse in the space. And for a long time, it was like, I know Alan Kaplan has an album called Hoyt's Garage. It was like a rite of passage in LA. Like it was a really big deal to get invited to come out and play music with these guys. It's just trombone players. And if you got, like I know Alan Kaplan said that if you got invited out, that's how you knew you were being welcomed as a professional trombonist in LA. And when Tommy was doing it, like sometimes they had Dick Nash in the group, who's a great trombonist. George Roberts was in the group. Just like apparently all the biggest LA guys we're going through this Hoyt's Garage thing. I don't know if it's still around. I thought about doing a bunch of research on it, but like I said, I think that it might even warrant its own episode down the road. But yeah, it just sounds super cool. This like gathering of trombone players in LA that's like this society of guys who have made it, you know?
Yeah, I didn't know about the Hoyt's Garage thing, but you know, a lot of those guys you mentioned being involved with it, those Hollywood, a lot of those guys are in that the Hollywood Trombones album, I guess, or the group's Hollywood Trombones. I know them for their Christmas album, oddly enough. So there's some big names in that all recorded in Tommy. They're all Tommy Peterson arrangements. Tommy Peterson played tenor the whole time through those. But they even had some contra bass trombone in there, lots of bass trombones in there, man. Dude, Tommy, it really seems like Tommy was really doing his best to organize groups of trombonists and write for them. You mentioned a lot of this music. I can't help but think that this one piece of music that I played for a trombone choir concert called "The Trombone That Ate the World." And if somebody has a link where I can purchase that piece, please send it. Please send it in, because I have actually searched for that piece since I played it, and I have not been able to find it. So that's something too. But that was a Tommy Peterson piece that I really enjoyed. But I can't help but imagine that was probably something similar to something written for Hoyt's Garage, because it was a trombone choir piece that now I just can't find. So I can't. It makes me wonder how much of that music just never got published or was published for a short time.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, I will say that like that Hollywood Trombones album and some other ones, I think are probably products of Hoyt's Garage, especially if Tommy wrote them, because it did say that a lot of the albums that came out for Trombone Ensemble were a product of this Hoyt's Garage thing, where they would just take certain stuff and come out with it. And yeah, man, like I'd imagine that's where he did most of his trombone. I mean, if they're meeting like weekly or whatever, and he's playing with like these super high level guys, I can't imagine that he would have brought trombone choir music much elsewhere at that time. And yeah, there's like a lot. I feel like there's a lot of lore with Tommy Peterson. It's crazy, you know. Like I was saying, like I knew about his literature. It wasn't even until just recently that I was like, I wonder how good Tommy Peterson was. You know, if he was like really killer on trombone or not. And apparently he was amazing. That's not surprising with how the stuff he writes. But yeah, you know, this whole kind of theme of getting someone who is famous for their contribution to the trombone world more than they're playing, he definitely exemplifies that, because a lot of his studio work and stuff kind of goes under the radar. But his contribution to the trombone world is like, if you're studying trombone, he's a name you're going to know. So I definitely feel like he's, you know, a patron saint of the trombone. But who do you, on the theme of writing, man, who do you have, Ben?
So the first guy that came to mind when we were talking about composers, you know, you mentioned Tommy Peterson, of course. But when I was thinking somebody more modern, Stephen Verhelst came to mind. So Stephen Verhelst was a bass trombonist who also became a composer. He studied with Ben van Dijk and Jurgen van Rijn for a time, but really he's most known for his compositions. He has lots of compositions for wind band, for solo trombone, for low brass ensembles, things like that. Probably his most famous composition would be a song called "Song for Japan." Just after the Fukushima nuclear meltdown that happened in Japan, Stephen Verhelst actually put out this music for free, and some trombonists got together and played it and used it as a way to bring attention, but also even raise money to help the efforts to clean up after this nuclear meltdown in Japan. And I think that really, while he was already well established, I think that really pushed him to the forefront or at least got him a lot of attention. It's probably one of the most popular trombone ensemble pieces out there now. If you go on Stephen Verhelst's website, like you can find Song for Japan, it's solo, duet, trio, quartet, octet. I think it even goes out to 12-piece trombone choir. It expands out to, along with full band, amongst other things. So there's that. I mean, he puts out tons of trombone solo music. Other popular things he put out, Devil's Waltz, which was a bass trombone duet, which once again, a lot of bass trombone players are going to know. But even more recently, though, Verhelst put out something very similar to Song for Japan again. This is free. Something called Song for Health, which was a tribute to healthcare workers during the coronavirus outbreak. So I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't even know about the Song for Health until we did our research for this, which there's plenty of videos if you guys would like to see that. But also, the music is available for free. So I think that's worth checking out as well. I mean, you guys could look this up too, but Verhelst has tons of recordings of his music. Lots of very well-known trombone players are recording his music. Ben Van Dyke comes to mind. I know he's recorded some of it, but like I said, man, Verhelst is the real deal, and I think he's a really great advocate for trombones in general, and does so by producing great music for us. But I think in general, guys, if you want a good resource and some free legal trombone music, like I said, there's a couple pieces on StephenVerhelst.com that you can check out. Song for Health and Song for Japan are both free, but his other music's also really affordable. And like I said, it's the two free songs for sure come in different. They have different orchestrations, everything from 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12 trombones to wind bands and solos. Like I can't recommend this guy enough, because I think it's important that we really support the guys who are alive. And Verhelst is young, still putting out lots of music, and I imagine that anything you buy is going to go straight to him and go back into the trombone community, because the music he writes is getting played by trombonists. So I don't know. I felt like he was definitely worth including in the composer realm. Just somebody that's probably going to be composing for trombones for a while. We have a lot of time with. He still will be composing for us. But like I said, whenever there's something, whenever the world is in times of need, it seems like he's always releasing something that is pretty uniting, which a lot of these videos are on YouTube that he has. He has a lot of his stuff out on YouTube to check out. So definitely check out Stephen Verhelst if you're looking for a modern composer who's got this Tommy Peterson-esque attitude about composing and putting out things for the trombone.
Yeah, man. I'll say that that Song for Japan, man, that was like when that came out, that was such a big deal. I mean, I know I played it like in the duet format and in the trio format, quartet, probably.
I believe we might have played it in the 8-part format.
Yeah, we did. We played it in the choir format. And but I know there was like a YouTube video that was put out where a bunch of people were playing different parts, and it had like all the big guys in it. It had Christian Lemberg, Joe Alessi, Jorgen von Riem, Megumi Kondo was in it. Just a number of big people were in it, and then there was different group sizes. And that piece was a really big deal. I remember playing a lot. I actually found out that piece was composed before the incident in Japan, and I always thought it was composed for the incident in Japan, but it was made before that. People had recorded it previously. It blew my mind. Yeah. So the last person we're going to talk about, And I'm sure we left out a ton of people. I'd really love to know who you guys think of as like a big advocate for the trombone that we didn't talk about. The last person I want to talk about is Brad Edwards. I didn't really know who Brad was till a couple years ago, but he's a huge guy in the world of trombone pedagogy. I just recently he got the job at Arizona State. Before that, he taught at the University of South Carolina and then the University of Northern Iowa before that. He has a number of books out. The Intermediate Trombonist, Lip Slurs, which I know is like a couple different variations on melodies. The Trombone Craft, which he has for tenor and bass. Patterns and Snippets, also for tenor and bass. And he has Tuning Drones and Simply Singing for Winds, which is just an all-encompassing thing. He also has a book called Introductory Studies in Tenor and Alto Clef before Blazevich, which is interesting. If you don't know, Blazevich is like a Russian composed book. It's not always like I know they've done renditions that are all in bass clef because you can use it just to study straight through, but it's a big book that gets used for learning clef studies because it switches between bass, tenor, and alto. But he has a precursor book to that apparently. I personally have his Lip Slurs book, and I pull excerpts and stuff from that for my warm-ups and everything, and I think he also does an amazing job of explaining stuff. I recommend that you go check out his website, thetrombonezone.org. I'm sorry, just trombonezone.org, not the... he has a ton of compositions and stuff, but he has just a list of free resources, 22 tips to getting better. It's just a ton of different stuff on there, improving your high range, free audition solos, and tuning a quick visit, a PDF. So he's got a bunch of free services, and his name is constantly popping up in the world of pedagogy. And I think he just took over kind of what Doug Yo's position was at Arizona State. But just one of the leaders in pedagogy. I'm sure he's a phenomenal player, but I personally just don't know him that well because he's playing. I know him because of the amount of literature he's put out in this pedagogy stuff, and so that's kind of why I included him on the list.
Yeah, man, I know you told me about his Lip Slurs, and when I looked into him more, I mean, like I saw he's got a lot out there, and definitely more recent too. So there's a lot of things that I should check out with Brad Edwards. I'm glad that you managed to introduce me to him.
Yeah, man, he just seems to be the guy pedagogy-wise. Also say, like I said, that when I've used his books personally, I think he does an incredible job of explaining stuff. He's just really good at breaking things down for you. And I think that's just going to about do it. I'm sure there's a ton of people we didn't mention that definitely need to be mentioned, and please let us know in the comments. I know that, like I said, there's a ton of players that I could have been like, J.J. Johnson was phenomenal and changed the entire landscape of trombone, but I was trying to kind of steer in like a narrow direction of someone who, through either composition, education, or material like resources or videos or whatever has brought people to the trombone. And, that's not to say the players don't do that. I just feel like, someone like Ian Bousfield, for example, we could do a whole episode on what he does as a whole. So with that, I'm going to go to this week's album recommendation, which, because we've been doing all of this Patron Saints stuff and talking about these different guys, I decided to go with Michael Davis's Hip Bone Big Band. It is on Spotify. I don't know if it's on Apple Music. Do you know about that, Ben?
I can check that real quick.
It's on Apple Music as well. I could list everyone in the big band. I'm going to save you all some time. Not that everyone else isn't great, and there's some incredible players. Apparently his son plays trumpet on the second track. Interesting. But I wanted to list off these trombone players. They're kind of spread throughout. He has different compositions on here, including an arrangement of that Trombone Institute technology that we talked about, arranged for the whole band. There's a YouTube video of that out there you should go check out because the trombone section is super killing, and it's a super killing arrangement. But the trombones featured are Michael Davis, obviously, Marshall Gilkis on tracks 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 11, Nick Finzer, Keith O'Quinn, Conrad Herwig, Bob McChesney, Andy Martin, Birch Johnson, Michael Dees, Amy Sallow, Jeff Nelson, George Flynn, and Bill Reichenbach. And it's just a super killing album. I highly recommend it. It's very trombone-y. All of the arrangements are Michael Davis originals composed for the people who play the solos. I had to buy it when it originally came out. I think it's just recently on Spotify, but it was worth every penny. But I think that's all we got for you. You got any final remarks, Ben?
No, man. Like I said, I think it was pretty neat to be able to explore this. And, there are tons of people that we left out. As we were talking about this, I thought of a couple of YouTube guys who probably would have been worth a mention. But I think it's important for us just to try to recognize these guys and support trombone players who are trying to support trombone players. Anything you pay back to them is going to end up coming back to the trombone world in some way. So, buy your books from people like Brad Edwards, pay for a Michael Davis lesson or two, one of his classes, buy a couple solos from Stephen Verhelst. Do what you can to support these guys who are still putting out great content in the trombone world and trying to keep the trombone side of things up and moving.
Yeah, man. I just, everyone we talked about in this episode kind of exemplifies what we're trying to do with this podcast and just creating an interest on the trombone. And as always, thank you guys for listening, and happy shooting.